City of Tampa Community Redevelopment Agency is now in session on June 13th, 2019. Mr. Carlson, excuse me, Councilman Carlson, you have someone that's going to do our invocation this morning.
Good morning. If you all would like to step up. We've got Kamlesh Darji, who works as an executive for a fast-growing hospitality management company. He is also a coach and a podcast-winning or has a podcast called Winning Karma, which focuses on self-mastery and living a better, more fulfilled life. And then Rasesh Patel is a pharmacist by profession with many different accolades and affiliations, including with the International Academy of Compounding Pharmacists and the American Society of Consultant Pharmacists. He sits on many different representative boards and makes frequent congressional visits and is a legislative advocate for compounding pharmacies. He's also an active member for BAPS and serves in community outreach. So come on forward to the podium. I wanted, the city of Tampa celebrates its diversity, and as the mayor said last night in the Mayor's Forum on the Arts, diversity is one of our strengths, and one of the fastest growing, largest communities in our city is the Indian community and also the Hindu community. And so we wanted to invite you all to come speak to celebrate that. And also they just told me that their spiritual leader will be here next year, and hopefully we can try to engage him in some way. It sounds like he's going to fill Emily Arena or one of the big venues here. So thank you and welcome. Please say the invocation.
If we could please rise and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Om Sahna Vavatu Sahno Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahe Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi.
Oh, may we be protected together. May He nourish us both together. May we work together with great energy. May our study be vigorous and effective. May we not quarrel. Om, let there be peace in me. Let there be peace in my environment. Let there be peace in the forces that act on me.
Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrutyorma Amrutam Gamaya. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi.
Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Jai Swaminarayan.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Roll call.
Dingfelder.
Here.
Goots.
Here.
Maniscalco.
Here.
Vieira. Miranda.
Here.
Carlson.
Here.
Citro.
Here. Councilman Louis Vieira will be joining us in just a few minutes. First item on our agenda today, we have a community report from the downtown CRA.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Abby Ahern here, representing the CAC of downtown. Lots of great updates for you. We have multiple projects with cranes in the air or on their way here. But some of the major things, Herman Massey has gone through their park design. We've got 2 submittals that look great. The residents are tweaking it currently, and that will be underway soon. American Land Ventures amended the roadway agreement to include the demolition for the Germany Library, and permitting is underway. Demolition will start mid-July. The JW Marriott is on the 19th story of construction. Madeira is in permitting for their project, which is right by the Times building. Tyler Residences is the parcel that's just north of the Marriott Residences on Tyler, and they'll have a mixed-use residential tower coming in. Domino's Pizza, as you've all heard, is relocating into 915 Franklin to open up some alternative parking for the new developments that are taking place. And there's a proposed tower of 34 stories at Ashley and Twiggs. Very small parcel, but we'll have great views of Curtis Hickson and the river. and some great urban views as well. And Water Street has completed their second phase of the second stage of the first phase. So, and I brought a little book that they handed out at our last meeting. I can pass around to you if y'all like. So lots of development taking place, lots of fun things. Mayor's 4th of July celebration, the scooters are getting mixed reviews, but I think overall they've been very great for our city. We're moving forward as the CAC to continue with helping businesses and property owners. So we still have the grants program, and we have the facade improvement program that's coming about. I also brought a little sheet. Last year we were able to assist a business that starts and incubates tech companies to come and expand in Tampa, and they're being wildly successful. So I brought some of their stats for you as well if you'd like any of this information. And besides that, we're hoping for Sail Pavilion to wrap up end of summer, early fall, and downtown's just having a great time. So, thank you. Any questions?
Councilman Dingfelder.
Hi.
Hi. Well, thank you for serving on this. Just a couple of questions, and I'm new back to the board, so. So I take it do you live or work downtown, or what got you involved?
My offices are in downtown. We own a commercial property in downtown at the corner of Tampa and Twigs, above Moxie's and Bamboozle, and I live on the Hillsborough River right next to Armature Works.
Okay.
So
And
I live here.
how about the other members of your board? What would the mix be in terms of residents versus? And is there a requirement for residency versus business types?
I don't know if there's a percentage basis of what it's supposed to be, but we have a good mix of both. I think there are 4 members of the business community, and some are in the planning type legal side of things to help make sure that we're making great business choices. And then we have 2 residents, and we have an ex officio from the partnership, the downtown partnership.
So just out of curiosity, what's the residential experience like? For folks downtown, what are they saying positive? What are they saying negative? And it's interesting you mentioned the scooters, because we are getting a lot of comments on the scooters. But just generally speaking, I mean, how is the residential experience?
I think the residential folks are wanting and demanding more of the city as far as opportunities like the scooters. From what it sounds like, they are very happy with them being able to get around and not having to get their cars out of garages or whatever that may be. They're really happy with the restaurants being open in the evenings and later hours. They'd probably like some more curb appeal as far as beautification, and they're really excited about the Massey Park being redeveloped.
Yeah, and I was curious about when I saw that in the upcoming budget. It concerns me a little bit. This, just in regard to, I know when we closed it, we were having a lot of, for lack of a better term, homeless issues in Massey Park, and I think that's one of the reasons that they kind of closed it and fenced it for a number of years.
Yeah.
So what are the plans for that park, and how? I guess my last question would be, how is it the homeless issue? Is it, from your perspective, is it on the rise or on the decline? Or
I would say it's on the decline with the activation of a lot of the retail storefronts in the area and the new development of 915 and Mole Abuela and former Fly Bar, and all of the activity now. People are using the Franklin Street corridor as more pedestrian friendly. I think as long as we're looking at activating the park and using it for things like dog parks, dog areas, and potentially some exercise equipment, and it's utilized and not just surface benches, we will continue to see success in Massey Park.
Is it going to be fenced and have hours of operation?
It will be sunrise to sunset. The park comes around and does that for all the parks. It will be somewhat fenced, and anyone that's there after hours will receive a trespassing notification, is my understanding. There are certain areas that are fenced for the dog areas, and then other areas that are gonna be wide open so that it's a little more inviting.
Well, great. Well, again, thanks for your service. I didn't catch your name at the beginning.
I'm Abby,
Oh,
Abby
Ab-
Ahern.
I've seen your name. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Councilman Goods.
Good morning.
Hi, nice to see you.
Well, thank you for allowing me to sit in on your meeting the other night. As you know, I've been going around to our different CRAs that are in my district. Most of them are all in my district. And I was able to take away some information the other night and was able to pass that on to another CRA. And I think information is good, especially when there's a good product. But I want to ask Mr. McDonough, since he's here in the audience, the CRAs, is there a quarterly meeting with all the CRA chairmen or boards that they meet and can brainstorm about ideas and what's going on in different areas to maybe help facilitate new progress or new growth in other CRAs?
As a matter of fact, they've done that several times. They do it on an ad hoc basis. It was decided about 2 years ago among themselves that they would like to do that, to share ideas. So from time to time, they do that. And I think the last meeting they had was in Ybor probably 5 or 6 months ago.
5 or 6 months ago. Well, I didn't know that, and I was sitting on a CRA board around about that time and never heard of that type of meeting. So maybe it's not advertised properly, maybe the information not disseminated properly, but I'd like to see that happen on a more frequent basis. I think the more information you get, the more powerful you are. So I don't recall, I served in that board about a year. I don't recall ever going to a meeting with other CRAs. So if you can get me the minutes or those dates that those occurred, I'd appreciate it, but I haven't
I'd be
seen those
happy to
minutes.
do that. And again, it was done on the violation of the chairs of the different CRAs. They did that on a voluntary basis.
Volunteer basis. Okay.
Correct. Again, these are volunteers, and I can't necessarily force them to attend meetings with other CRAs. And there are sunshine issues we need to be careful about as well.
Well, okay, well, I'll set a meeting with Mr. Jorge, and I'll discuss how that intertwines with sunshine. Because
Certainly.
I like to see at least somehow that they can meet to share ideas. I don't think that'd be a total sunshine violation just to hear ideas. So, but I'll get with him in the future and find out what we can do and how we can make that better, because I think information is viable to everyone. Thank you, sir.
I think also, just to piggyback on that a little bit, Mr. Rossner falls under multiple of the CRAs, so he often brings that knowledge and base to each of the groups at each of our meetings. So if one thing is happening for one of the groups, he's usually sharing that input with the others and vice versa. Or if something they've already experienced in another group, they bring that to our attention and we work through it together and just to make improvements happen a little faster. For instance, like the facade improvement grant, because that's happening in other CRA, CAC areas, it was already streamlined and ready to go when it came to the downtown opportunity.
Thank you, sir.
Helpful.
Thank you, Ms. Ahern.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Mr. Bob McDonough.
Good morning, Board. Bob McDonough, Economic Development. I'd like to share with you the preliminary tax rolls and the increases from each of the CRAs. I think you'll see some. Again, this is a preliminary tax roll. It will be finalized later this summer. Average increase is 18.8%. You can see some of them have some very large increases. Central Park obviously has a very robust one. East Tampa's up 38%, Tampa Heights Riverfront 125%. The city as a whole is about a 9% increase in its tax rolls. So I would venture, based on the increases in property taxes, that the CRAs are faring better than the city as a whole. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the CRAs and some of the action that's going on there. Central Park, again, you see a great jump in values. Again, this is a preliminary number. They have challenged it in the past based on the amount of affordable housing that's in there. So that is subject to change. We have a group meeting, finally. There's interested parties. Councilman Goose was in attendance in their latest meeting, and there's great interest right now in the building paths within Encore. So we might see some more development there in the not-too-distant future. And the Channel District was seeing a lot of work from the Strategic Action Plan in the works. The Channel Side Drive Plan is being worked on now. There's infrastructure on each of the streets, which will finish the Strategic Action Plan, and the Madison Street Park, which is the last of the 3 parks which was envisioned in the Strategic Action Plan. The new hotel on Meridian opens in July, and I'm sure you'll be receiving, if you have not received, an invitation to the grand opening of that. Downtown, Abby just gave a very thorough report on that. Drew Park, today you'll have an approval for Lineal Park, a construction contract, something that might be of interest because I know it was raised at one of your previous meetings about WMBE participation. The primary contractor on this is a WMBE contractor. And we have some new members that will be asking to be approved today for Drew Park. Then in East Tampa, the Strategic Action Plan RFP should be issued this week. We will make sure that that is publicized via city newsletters as well and on the public, so we get as much response as we can. As you know, some of the other CRAs recently had strategic plan workshops, and they were very well attended. And we're going to work to make sure that the same thing happens in East Tampa, that all of the residents know that this is going on so they can participate in this, to make sure that the update in the strategic plan reflects what they want to see in their community. We have 26 properties going out for RFP, and that will be happening this month. And the East Tampa CRA has decided that they would like to leverage their TIF funding with the COT Housing Department for down payment assistance for residents of East Tampa. And so that program will be kicking off as part of the 2020 budget. Again, all of the CRAs and the city council, or the board sitting as a city council, has expressed a lot of interest in pumping up our housing for folks that need a little assistance with that. And the East Tampa CRA is one of the groups who's doing that. Sir?
Does that conclude your report?
It does, yes, sir.
Any questions for Mr. McDonough? Councilman Dingfelder.
I'll wait for anybody else.
Can you tell me how that program's gonna be laid out for East Tampa, for that house?
In the 2020 budget, I believe $400,000 is being allocated for down payment assistance, and that is for up to $15,000. And prerequisite with that, same as our housing department with our down payment assistance, is that folks who are interested in that program will need to go through a housing education program. So, you know, buying the house is part of it, but understanding regular maintenance and some of the other charges that come up. So by the time that they are qualified then and get this down payment assistance, they've had some educational assistance to know what to expect when buying a house. And there's also a post-purchase program as well to continue that education process.
Thank you.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you. Morning, Bob.
Good morning.
Thanks for all you do. Just a couple of questions. I was going through the nice budget book that let's see what it's dated. I guess it's this year for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2019. And just had some sort of questions to get a little historical perspective, and also, you know, to look at it prospectively in terms of what we're going to be doing in the next budget. Mm-hmm. And I was curious about, I know in the downtown budget, and I think I saw perhaps in the EBOR budgets, is some transportation expenses as related to.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, transportation expenses.
Yes.
Especially as related to the streetcar and downtown streetcar. I think it's showing about 150,000.
Correct.
I was always very supportive of that because I'm supportive of the streetcar. And also it shows for the downtown a shuttle service of 450,000.
Right.
Which again, I think is important, you know, to get people around downtown and that sort of thing. I don't know about the 450, but and we can explore that. But now I'm wondering, since there is an alternative source of transportation funds, will the CRA be expected to continue to contribute, toward the streetcar, because with the All for Transportation money, that's a big pot of money, and part of it, I think, is for the operation and expansion of the streetcar. Likewise, perhaps there, in the city, in the quote city budget, not in the CRA budget, there might be All for Transportation money for the shuttle service, et cetera. So I'm just wondering, obviously, we not looking at this regressively, but looking at it prospectively. I'm sure you've thought about this and you've talked about this. So where are we headed? That's just question number one.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, that's a great question. And that particular subject has not been raised yet. Because again, there's still a legal battle as to whether or not this is constitutionally correct and whether or not that money can be taxed.
Yeah.
And so that question is there, and then budget forward. But with the streetcar, that happens on an annual basis.
Correct.
So we do not have a long-term, the CRA does not have a long-term obligation. On an annual basis, the CRA board decides, and the CACs, whether or not they want to contribute to the streetcar. So we'll look on that on an ongoing basis, because I don't think that, again, they're also looking at the expansion of the streetcar.
Right.
So that question has not been asked and answered yet, because we don't know when the funds will be available and how they'll be apportioned.
Yeah. I mean, personally, like I say, I'm supportive of the streetcar. I have a feeling board members are supportive of the streetcar, just like we've always been. I would be supportive of leaving it in the next budget if there's still unresolved questions, but
Right.
perhaps not writing the check, just to see how that works out. And then if they don't need it, because because perhaps the legal issues are resolved in favor of Hart, et cetera, then we don't have to cut the check and we can just modify the budget and back it out. Maybe that's a way to to address it.
I agree. And again, one of the things that happened this past year, if you remember, there's a much more robust service and they're offering it for free because they got a lot of money from FDOT for more enhanced service. And the same with the downtowner. The original concept with that was the CRA was going to be supported for a number of years, and then it was going to become somewhat self-sufficient through advertising and other fees. And so that contribution was looked at as being sunsetted at some point as well. And that's looked at on an annual basis as well. But you're right, this is a whole new world for the first time, and I mean, as long as I've lived in this city, that there'll actually be real money apportioned towards transportation alternatives.
Right.
And we'll find out.
Okay. And then my next question, I think this is mostly Ybor. I don't know if I saw it anywhere else, but I saw in a past budget it said parking garage upgrades. And it wasn't a huge amount. I think I came across one, Ybor City one, for $40,000. But I guess my question would be, I think we all are under the notion that the parking department is its own entity, enterprise fund, I believe. And so I guess historically, I'm wondering why the CRA, it looks like for the past 4 years, has been contributing $50,000, $50,000, $20,000, $40,000 for parking garage upgrades.
And I think I might have answered this at a previous meeting, but the Ybor garage, Ybor Centro, is the only garage in the city that has public restrooms. They were put in there by the request of the YCDC. So the maintenance and upkeep and daily cleaning of that is paid for through the YCDC. And also, Ybor wanted a higher level of security in the garages and for longer than the normal parking agreement that the parking would do. So these above normal enhancements were agreed upon to be paid for by Ybor.
And is this, as you said, an ongoing agreement?
That's correct, yes.
A contractual agreement?
It's done on an annual basis, yes. It was agreed upon, well, the security could change tomorrow. If Ybor said, well, you know what, we're happy with the normal level of security that the city provides for all of their garages, that money could be backed out. But again, people want extra security there till 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning when some of the clubs close. Now the restrooms, that is an ongoing obligation because that was done as part of the agreement to build a garage.
So that's just a maintenance, that's just maintenance, like a cleaning crew? to go
Cleaning
in?
and repairs, because there are a fair amount of repairs that are necessitated in that garage. There's more vandalism in that garage restroom than you might find in some other ones.
Okay.
Councilman Dingfelder, if I may. Mr. McDonough, this was an option worked out between the city and YCDC years ago,
That's correct.
because Ybor City wanted to remove the parking meters. So now Ybor City has 2-hour parking for free, and this was an option that was done between Ybor City, YCDC, and the parking division, that YCDC helps pay the maintenance in the parking garage?
That was one of the other caveats, was that the YCDC wanted to have public restrooms in the garage,
Thank you.
which would be open for extended hours.
So it was an option basically for us to say, come down to Ybor City.
Right.
We have 2-hour parking, and it was this option was worked out between parking division for the city of
Correct.
Tampa. and-
These are enhancements that we wish to see in this CRA district, and we're willing to pay for them.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. Please proceed, Councilman Dingfelder.
So you indicate that's an ongoing contractual obligation between the CRA and the city parking?
I'll have to look to see if it was actually in writing someplace, but I know that was the agreement that, and I'm sure it is somewhere, I'll find it.
Okay.
That they agreed to build restrooms specifically because of the request.
Okay. You said you've given that report before. I don't remember it last month, and that's the only time
Okay.
3 of us have been here
Yeah.
in recent years. And then the last question I have for today is, this relates actually to Ms. Burton, who's we're glad to see has joined us today. She mentioned about millions of dollars going to strategic partners, SPP, and of course we read this in the paper and that sort of thing. I see on the FY19 budget for downtown, it specifically references a $6 million transfer to strategic property partners. So just for everybody's edification, and again, I know you've gone through this with the prior board,
No.
but not with this board. Why don't you tell us a little bit of that history, what that $6 million is for, what it's about, will it come back, et cetera, et cetera?
Certainly. Several years ago, the city and the county entered into a joint agreement with Strategic Property Partners. They came to the city and said, look, we're getting ready to build approximately $3 billion worth of real estate development in downtown. We have a concern that the water and sewer and road network is not up to snuff. And we would like to see those things upgraded. And they would be willing to do that at the same time as they're doing construction, so the city's not tearing up roads after they build their buildings. So we agreed that the city and the county would fund up to $50 million apiece for public infrastructure. That's water, sewer, stormwater, roads, and sidewalks. Public facilities. Nothing on private property. I'll give you an example. They have a central cooling plant that is done to cool their buildings instead of having separate chillers. When those pipes were put in, they were put in at SPP's expense, not at the city's, not at the county's. That was not a reimbursable. And so anything that's being done, they have already spent the money. We have people out there examining the plans and the contract work, and it's being paid back as a reimbursable. They spend it, they do the work, and we reimburse them. We've had development agreements in other parts of the city where somebody's building something, and as long as they're there, we have them do some water work or sewer work or sidewalk work and reimburse them. Because a lot of times, it's more efficient that way. It's not 2 people mobilizing, it's not 2 overheads for 2 contractors, and maybe more importantly, the timing works out.
So you mentioned $50 million total between the city and the county?
No, $50 million each
Each?
was the ceiling. It looks as if now that this is going to be achieved, maybe for a total of about $51 million.
Total.
That's what it looks like right now.
So
unless
25-ish each? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
And is that, looking at the $6 million here in the FY19 budget, Is that what, is the city contributing as well, or is this just a CRA contribution?
No, it's the CRA. That was the agreement. Again, it's public infrastructure, so it's the CRA that's paying for it.
Okay, and so that's gonna go on, let's say arguably, for 6 total, is this the first year?
It's the
6 million?
second year,
Second year?
right.
Okay,
Again,
so arguably for a total of what, 4 or 5 years?
I would think that will probably be done in the next year or 18 months would be my guess, unless there are other phases that are.
No, I meant
added
in
to
terms of the pay, the 6 million, 6 million, 6 million, it's gonna take us 4 or 5 years to pay it?
that. Yeah, please. Rob Rosner is actually overseeing that work. He could probably be a little more accurate than I.
Hi, Rob Rosner, Downtown CRA. As a matter of fact, we met about that this week with SPP. There's two phases of work with 3 stages each. They've completed phase 1. We paid that last year. They're getting ready to submit at the end of this month their second one for completing stage 2, and they'll be starting stage 3 this next month. And it's all the road network that is kind of south of Cumberland. It was the first phase, and there's a couple of stages, and because of the timing of how they have to reverse traffic and do the MOT, that's why it's taking the time it takes, because they'll have to pull off 2 lanes, reroute people, build the new work, get it all inspected, get it up and running, and reroute. So during this whole process of realigning this grid, it's going to take us about 3 to 4 years to get the entire grid realigned. The number is around 50 million now. Their phase 3 portion, which is north of Cumberland, they just acquired the property for the mill, and there's a little bit of road work up there that they don't have a cost for yet because they haven't fully designed it. So the total will probably be around 65 or so, but they're guessing at the moment because they haven't got a design to get a price from. But what we have on the books coming up this month is $9.8 million, which we'll paying half, and the county pays their half. So they go through the CRA, county pays us, we pay them. So that's how we get the money transferred. So they've been working on this August to July route, so we expect that 3rd phase to go from August to July of next year. And then when they get into phase 2, which is the other work, that's when the schedule gets a little different, because most of the grid will be done and the buildings can start coming up. Then the other work has to be done, and that'll be timed to by when buildings open and that kind of stuff. So it'll vary. It won't be just, the first 3 years were kind of pretty regular. You know what they were, and they were doing between $10 and $11 million a year. So our half would have been the 5.5 to 6. So we ballparked it at 6 when we put it in the budget, because they didn't give us a final number when we were doing our budget process.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Bob, just in terms of the bigger picture and the policy behind it, and obviously a couple of us weren't around for this, I always find it a little sad that the downtown CRA brings in a huge amount of money, $13 million, but then seems to get stripped out of that money for major stuff like financing the convention center, which it has done for many, many years, and it looks like we're continuing to do it in some form of repayment fee, $4 million a year. And now this. I guess, was there a discussion that the city would have paid for the streets and infrastructure and water and wastewater? I mean, the enterprise funds were there, that the city would have paid for that just like they normally would as compared to the CRA?
The CRA was basically started to fund the convention center bonds. That was the reason for it.
I remember.
And they actually were retired. And the CRA right now is actually funding some upgrades to the convention center. That's what that $4 million that you saw there.
Right.
The idea of a community redevelopment area and TIF funds are basically to support development. And so we're spending money right now, and in return, we're, again, growing the TIF.
Well, but my specific question was there discussion, typically if this had gone on in a non-CRA area, then perhaps like Midtown or something like that, then maybe the developer would have looked to the city, and the city water and wastewater and transportation departments might have been looked to come up with that type of funding. But in this case, I guess it was fortuitous for somebody that it was in a CRA. Or was that discussed at all, or
There was a conversation about it. The city obviously did not have funding of this magnitude that they could put towards a real estate development.
Yeah.
And again, the goal of generally a community redevelopment area is to support development, and that's what we're using the funding for.
Yeah, I guess what triggers in my mind, and this is my last question, Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
thank you, is that, when Ms. Ahern, she said, well, we'd like to see more streetscapes and that sort of thing. Well, what appears to happen downtown is we have, 300 or 400, well, not even that. We don't have a whole lot of money for capital projects. I guess there was $2 million for capital projects. I'll have to see what they were, but anyway, there seems to be less money for the kind of smaller projects, like the Massey Park and that sort of thing, because of these bigger projects get sucked down. That's more of a comment than a question.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Councilman Maniscalco.
Real quick, and this is off topic, but maybe not. Maybe you can answer it. I heard something about a re-bricking of 7th Avenue, or some people wanted to do it, or that's not even, okay.
No, somebody might have raised that subject, but no.
All right, that's it.
Councilman Goods.
I kind of see where Mr. Deanfeld is going, because when I look at East Tampa, the roads, we've paid a lot annually for the roads to be repaved in East Tampa. And I think that's a part of the city's duty out of the general fund versus sucking the CRA's money for actual work and projects we really need to be done. So I can see where he's going, and when you're saying you're looking at roads and sewers and we're giving money to people, that just kind of bothers me a little bit. But again, I see where he's going with that, because you're sucking the people's money for, I believe, projects that the city should be doing. And again, that bothers me even with East Tampa, when we're sucking money from our CRA to do these sidebar projects. We've got to find another way, because I just think that, again, we're just sucking money. That's just my comment.
Councilman Carlson.
Sorry for maybe a newbie question, but as I understand it, the legislature was questioning the value of CRAs, and so you know better than I, the concept of CRA, you hold money in one section of the city and then don't spend it throughout the city in places that might need it. Does the city or the state have guidelines on the ROI of the CRA money, and also comparing that to how the money could have been spent or would have been spent throughout the city? Just thinking about for our own purposes of how best the money should be spent. Should we keep a CRA, or should we be spending it in other places? And then also, if we at one point had to justify it to the state, if we said these CRAs are really important, how do we justify the ROI to the state?
Okay. Multi-point question, multi-point answer. The questions that the state has had specific to CRAs was pertaining to, were the CRAs operating in the method that Chapter 163 intended them to? Because apparently in some other jurisdictions, there was not the transparency that you see in the city of Tampa. They did not publish annual reports. They did not have community groups that were involved. So if you looked at some of the guidelines that came down from the state, annual audits, well, it's something we already do. Publish all of this on the internet, it's something we already do. Share the information with the county, it's something we already do. Where they started to go, and they have for the past 4 or 5 years, but it is not, is specifically how the money could be spent. And the legislature is pushing towards more of the money being spent on sticks and bricks, road work, sidewalks, parks, that type of thing. And so the strategic action plans in the communities that we have, a good portion of the money that we spend is used exactly how the legislature is looking for it. Now, the question as to whether or not it would be more effectively spent over a broader area, I think if you look at the chart, spending targeted funds within a real estate district has created value and greater tax than the city as a whole. As I said, it looks this year as though taxes over the city will go up by about 9%, whereas the average in our CRAs is 18.8%, with East Tampa 38%. So targeting these funds within a certain area has raised values and created value within those communities. And that's the intent of having community redevelopment areas and targeted funds.
Do we know that for sure, though, that there's a correlation between holding that money back and the expenditures and the increase in investment? I know it looks anecdotal, but do we know for sure? I mean, the SPP one, you can directly connect it because presumably part of their investment was contingent on that. But how about the others? And then at what point would we hit diminishing returns on investment in that particular area? If downtown, for example, is growing really fast, would we stop spending and then start spending in another area?
Well, again, specifically to Chapter 163, you cannot spend the money anywhere else unless you dissolve that community redevelopment area. And then it goes back into the general fund and the money can be apportioned throughout the city. And different CRAs have different points that they're at. I think the Channel District is a really good example. With the programs that have been approved by the CRA board, the spending for road work and some of the infrastructure work and the third park, well, the strategic action plan will have been completed. And at some point, it will probably make sense for this board to say, it's time to dissolve this. There's no more blight. The infrastructure has been done. The upgrades that people wanted has been done. And that money could go back in the general fund and then be apportioned throughout the city.
I'll end now. Look forward to having a longer conversation with you about it for education, but also for planning. My goal in asking the questions is just I'm all about ROI and community ROI. I just want to make sure that we're focused on the things that matter most. And as you know, we've had questions from the community about where the money should be spent, and it looks like there's a lot of good work going on with the CRAs. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to spend the money.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. McDonough, you also have another report for us. Economic opportunity? Item number 3.
Oh, excuse me. During the last West Tampa CAC meeting, the chair of that organization, I believe vice chair, were up against a term limit. And to allow that person to continue in their role, they need to change the rules. And so the question was from the West Tampa CAC, is the board willing to change the policy pertaining to the length of term for the chairperson? And here's if you'd like, here's actually, Mr. Pinkfellow had a question earlier about the composition of each of these groups and what kind of person they're looking for, and then the general policies.
So, in a nutshell, Bob, what is the current policy as related to term limits, and what are they proposing, and does that apply across all CRAs?
No, this was a specific request from a singular district, and that would be West Tampa. And they're asking for the ability of the current chair to serve for another 2-year term.
But would we just be waiving it ad hoc as related to this particular person, or are we changing?
No, excuse me. I think in order to do that, you would change the rule in that particular CRA, which would be allowing that person, allowing the chair, not a particular person, but person serving as chair, to have another term. Mr. Martin?
There are no specific rules to this. People, you would want to change the policy for CAC operations in general throughout There is one exception, which has always been historically there, as to YCDC. YCDC was created well before it was appointed as the CAC, or the Community Advisory Committee, for the Ybor City CRA. So they cannot be asked in fairness to change their existing bylaws to meet some requirements that were adopted afterwards. But as to all other CRA areas, there is a uniform policy, and as it has been interpreted historically, it does create a term limit. It is the option of the current CRA to change that policy, but it would be a change that applies across the board to all CRAs. And I think in the interest of uniformity, that would be the preferred method, rather than creating ad hoc divisions, which are not conducive to continuity and uniformity.
Mr. Hughes, 1 second. Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I see it, Mr. Martine, this CRA has no policy regarding the person.
I'm not aware of any individual policies.
And my question is this: does it relate to other CRAs? Do they have policies?
I'm not aware of any other policies except the bylaws.
Yeah, but I'm not. I can't read.
Sir, what I handed out, if you look at number 7, term of office for committee chairman, and this is Community Advisory Committee policy, which is in the handbook that people receive. Each committee shall elect a chairperson for a term of 1 or 2 years at the discretion of the committee. Each committee should have an elected vice chair, will be the chairman-elect, to act in the chair's absence and to better assure smooth transition at the end of the chair's term of service. The chair will serve 1 year as past chair to help provide committee continuity. So there is a specific.
Let me ask this then: has that CRA formally asked this board?
That's why we're here today.
Or you're asking today for it?
That's correct.
So okay, I understand now. Thank you.
Hang on, Councilman Ziegler, Councilman Goode.
So as I read it, and Ms. McDonough said earlier, we was volunteers to be on the CAC, correct?
That's correct.
So let's say you have a board, and that board decides, well, nobody wants to be the chairman. I don't have time to do the extras that the chairman does. But the person who's sitting in that position has given the time, and the board says, we want to let this person continue being the chair. But you're saying we're creating a policy, or want to create a policy that dictates what? So, if we're volunteers, and I've got a person who wants to volunteer that capacity, and none of the other board members want to run for the position, what do we do, sir?
As I mentioned, I was present at the West Tampa CRA. I was asked to attend and present the position of the city, not the city, but of the CRA based on the policy statement. If you look at the current policy statement, you cannot serve multiple terms because there is a position created for last chair and present chair. So that, by inference, creates a term limit. That means if the CRA today finds that that is not conducive to voluntary participation by the members, you can change this rule. The CAC cannot change this rule. This is a policy created by the CRA, and it can be changed only by the CRA. So it was recommended to West Tampa to hold off action pending an opportunity to bring this matter before the CRA, and that's why we're here today. If you choose or you make a finding that differs from the existing policy, you're certainly welcome to proceed in that direction, given the approval of majority of the CRA.
But that wasn't my total question. I'm asking you, if nobody wants to run on that CAC board, and you have existing chairman, and no one wants to run for the chairmanship, you're telling me that it automatically just comes back to this board here, and we'll make that determination of how we want to proceed with allowing said person to continue in that role. Is that what you're saying, sir?
So the policy is not what I'm saying, it's what the policy is saying.
Sal Cerrito, I was here when all this was going on. Your question is a good question, but the only way to do that is you as a board change the rules. The rules right now said you can't go beyond the 2 years. If you want to make it 10 years, you want to make it 20 years, you want to make it 1 year, that's your decision. But what was happening is that there are two organizations that don't fall within this category because when the CRA areas were established, they already had ongoing organization. You mentioned YCDC. East Tampa has the same option because they had an organization there. And when that was created, it went right in the CRA plan for that area that said, this will be the organization that represents the CAC for you. So those are the two exceptions that exist. But you have a general rule with those two exceptions that said 2 years and you're out. You have to be out of office for one term to come back. It is up to you as the board to make the rules. So if you want to make that change, that is within your discretion to make the change, and it will be across the board except for those two which have their own rules, the East Tampa and the YCDC. It's within your control. They can't do it on their own, and that was what Mr. Martin was saying. They can't do it on their own. That's your decision.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Councilman Dingfelder, you got a comment?
Well, I assume the two-year term limit is there for a reason. It was probably put in a long time ago, and I guess it's been abided by perhaps, well, I assume except for those two organizations that have an exception. I don't know if those exceptions are stated in this document that we just received. But anyway, regardless. But what I was going to suggest, Mr. Chairman, was instead of throwing out the entire thing because we have one situation in one of the CRA districts, is perhaps, and I would look to legal counsel for advice on this, perhaps we would just add a sentence to item 7 which says the CRA, us, may waive the term limit for an additional 2-year term if requested by a particular, what do we call them, districts or area. If requested by a vote of the particular area. And so, in other words, obviously they're having an issue in West Tampa this year. Based upon that provision I just proposed, they could come to us and say, we need that provision waived because we've got a great chair, nobody else wants to serve perhaps, whatever that situation is, and we have the ability to waive it on a case-by-case basis.
Councilman Dingfelder, if I may, I had a motion prepared to helpfully resolve this. And as our council has said, if somebody needs to serve a second term, they can come before the CRA and ask for a second term. I think the resolution, the motion that I was going to make will resolve the issues that are at hand right now.
Okay.
So, but please proceed.
No, I'll be glad to listen to your proposed motion. What I heard was we don't have the ability to waive it on a case-by-case basis because that would be against Policy 7. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the way I read Policy 7, says that it's a 2-year term.
Maximum 2-year terms,
Right.
because at the option of the CAC, it could be a 1-year term.
1 or 2-year term, right.
So my thoughts are clarity in policy is always a good thing. It is up to the CRA to determine how you want to proceed with that. What you have suggested is legal and acceptable, and it could be a solution. There are other solutions. You can have Rule 7 changed to impose a specific time limit, or you can say that there are no time limits. But that's going to be a policy decision that's not made by the legal department. We're not elected officials, we're not answerable, but it's a policy decision that you are certainly free to make.
Well, Mr. Chairman, as long as we're at this fork in the road, what's your suggestion on this idea?
1 second, Councilman. Councilman Miranda.
I agree with everything's been talked and discussed. However, I'd like to see a caveat in there, providing that there's no one else that's been nominated to be chairperson, chair or vice chair. So that way, they can't say there's a monopoly. Somebody wants to be that.
Chair for life, huh?
Right. That's the only caveat I'd like to add to that statement.
And I would agree with that.
Okay. Any other comments? If I may, Councilman Dingfelder, would you please take over?
Mr. Citro.
Clarity was asked for by council in section 7. And my motion is going to be coming as moving forward, not to any elections that have taken prior to this date. Those terms will be served out. I understand Councilman Goods' point, but that can be brought back here to the CRA board, and we can change that at any time prior to election if there's no one else wanting to serve as president. Is that correct?
And that could be a caveat that we include in the current policy, that, you know, whatever provisions apply would be waived in the event that there are no other candidates for a chair or a vice chair.
So-
That could be written into your policy. That way you don't have to come back to the CAC each time, I'm sorry, to the CRA each time the CAC is faced with that situation.
So would this be done at the time if Councilman Goods or Councilman Dingfelder wants to amend the motion that I'm about to make? We can do that now at this time.
Absolutely.
Councilman,
You give me direction, I've got a pen and I can draft.
clarification on item number 7 is what I'm concerned about today. If Councilman Dingfelder or Councilman Goods wish to make an amendment to my motion, I will be happy with that, considering hearing their amendment first.
Right. Well, why don't we, you're keeping us in suspense, Mr. Citro. You want to let us know?
I know.
Let us know what your idea is?
I want to clarify before I make my motion. My motion is to set a term limit, a definite term limit of the time of the president and vice president, or chair and vice chair.
Okay, right now, it's 1 or 2 years. So
1 or 2 years.
What are you proposing?
Well, I'm proposing 1 2-year term limit. After that, someone else will be filling in on those positions if there is nominations or if there are people that will want to be new at these positions. But first, I want to set the time limit on the terms of the vice chair and the chair.
Okay.
That's the clarification that I would like.
Any comment on that from the board?
Well, I haven't made a motion yet.
You want to?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. CRA Board, if I may. I make the motion to amend Section 7 of the Community Redevelopment Agency Community Advisory Committee policy to read as follows. Terms of office for a committee elected officer. Each committee will elect a chairperson and a vice chairperson to act in the chair's absence for respective of 2-year term. No person should be elected to the office of chair or vice chair more than 1 consecutive term. This policy shall exclude the terms of elections of officers of the YCDC which are governed by its bylaws as it proceeds, this policy. And that's the end of my motion. Do you need me to restate that?
Chairman, City Attorney Torito made another point that the East Tampa CAC is also excluded, so if you would include that in your motion, that creates the 2 exclusions.
Excuse me.
That need to be,
And Sal, let me finish. I left the term, the YCDC is a corporation entity which exists prior to the CRA, as is the East Tampa. Those will be excluded.
I was not sure, Sal Torito, you said, can they serve 2 2-year terms? It sounds like, it sounded like you were saying that they can be no more than 1 consecutive, and I thought that meant, again.
1 term of 2 years.
Okay.
Okay. Now, of course, the vice chair can then proceed up to the chair.
The other clarification I meant, because of the discussion that was going on, is I wasn't sure if this was going to be prospective only, because if someone is serving beyond 2 years, except for the East Tampa and YCDC, they're not supposed to be there. Did you want them to continue, or did you want to have a new election for those people if they're serving beyond the current rule? Because there was discussion going back, and I wasn't sure, because thought I heard that it would be prospective. So if somebody's filling it, say there was a 2-year term and they're in their 2.5-year term, do you give them 4 years, or do you go back and have that one redone?
This, Councilman Randall.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Dingfelder, Chairman Dingfelder, at this point, I understand what's being said, but I'm not 100% concrete in how to express that, because if you have a 2-year term limit for 1 2-year term, and then there's nobody else who wants to run for the office, what do? Do you dissolve it? So what I'm saying is, I'm trying to think outside of the box in a broad form, because these all are all volunteers. So I'm not opposed to saying, yes, you can only serve 1 2-year term. That's what I think Mr. Good said earlier. However, if somebody in the audience can even nominate themselves, I guess you can do that, then you can't serve another term. It's getting convoluted a little, because we're trying to fix it, and we have a lot of ideas on the table.
One way of dealing with that would be possibly, you may not serve more than a 2-year term without a waiver by the board.
By this board?
Yes,
And that
your
was
board, not their
that
board,
was
your
my-
board.
That's what I was hoping the amendment would be from either Councilman Dingfelder or Councilman.
All right, Mr. Goods.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney, for protecting the House. You were a little more clear, because I was confused. I only have an 8th grade education, so the policy already says 1 to 2-year term. So I think the purpose that Mr. Miranda was saying, that I was originally saying, that we're volunteers. If you've got nobody to run and someone's there, you need somebody to protect the House. So I think the motion has to be, Mr. Citro included, to where the policy is what it is at this point. We just have to amend it to say a waiver be given by this board to continue on. So I think that's the only caveat that needs to be added to it, is if we come to that roadblock, we have a waiver and this board approves a waiver.
And I think,
Correct.
I think what Mr. Miranda was also adding to that is that the waiver would be based on the fact that there is no successor. And his caveat was, if someone else wants to run, you don't want to simply have it waived. You have other people interested in running, but you're going to give the original one there 2 more years because that's what you want to do. So I think his caveat was, and it's getting complicated, obviously, that you'd have a 2-year limitation, and the board may waive that 2-year limitation if there is no successor who wants to take that position and could be voted on. I think that's kind
And I
of
can
where he was
understand, so
going.
make sure you don't have any dictatorship going on. I do understand what he was saying, and I could agree with that.
My suggestion would be, after you've finished your discussion, we come back with language for you, and you can make that decision to make sure the language is what exactly what you're asking for, rather than trying to get that all done today. And that's all I'm recommending to you.
I've got a pen, I could grab.
Okay,
They've already,
then if he wants to draft it today, that's fine.
now,
Thank you.
now, has West Tampa already had an election already?
Okay.
Already? Because then how is that going to work if they've already got someone saying, we're gonna suspend that and then go?
I'm sorry, Councilman already says it's all prior elections.
Okay.
Stay the way they are.
All right,
This is going forward, this motion would go forward to the next elections coming up in every CAC.
I can respect that, okay.
Anybody else before I make a comment on the motion?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Mr. Citro, I guess I don't have your motion written in front of me, but I was just trying to figure out what was different from the existing policy, how your motion differs from the current policy of number 7.
If I may, Councilman, thank you very much. The current policy is vague in how many years they can serve, 1 or 2, and how many terms they can serve.
Okay, so you're just trying to tighten it up.
Clarify, yes, sir. Crisp it up a little bit.
Okay. And then we've got sort of friendly amendments to that as related to,
if you wish,
those 2 items. Okay. All right. So why don't we move on to the next item? Our legal counsel might draft something up and get us to us at the end of the meeting, if that's okay with the board. Okay. We'll move on to the next item and come back to this at the end.
Thank you,
If you don't
Councilman.
mind tabling your motion.
I will hold off onto that until we hear back from our counsel.
Thank you.
If that's all right with the rest of the,
Looks like it's fine.
thank you very much. Number 4, I'm sorry, public comments. Please remember that we have 3 minutes per speaker to speak on any item agenda.
Let me see mine back.
Good morning. Connie Burton. I would like to pay memory to the life of Martin Chambers that was killed in Central Park about 50 years ago. As a 19-year-old, I don't know what he could have, I don't know what his life could have possibly been, or what he would have been successful in doing. But I could tell you, back then, Central Avenue served as a hub for the African community in terms of ambition and hope. We haven't seen that in a very, very long time. We've been stricken with poverty programs to move our community forward. The terms have changed from poverty program to community block grant funding to even down to stimulus packages. When we thought our community would have an economic push. I'm kind of puzzled because in East Tampa, they're still working on a strategic plan from 09-14, and yet we hear about moving money. I don't know if it's the sale of properties from East Tampa. They're going into a housing development funding with the city when we're still in discussion. We're still in discussion in terms of what's going to make East Tampa better. So that's some confusion for me. When I get to the next meeting, I don't even know if it's a housing chair. I don't know how many meetings I've been into East Tampa when we don't even have housing meetings. Who's the chair of that? Mr. Gould would know. It don't exist. And so it's constant manipulation by the city staff to move that community in the direction in which it want to go. And the last thing I'm going to say is this. We're bringing hungry children down here. Sometimes even without gas money, it's necessary to come. But I could tell you one thing. I don't plan on doing another demonstration in East Tampa. All my demonstration is going to be wherever SPP funding has gone until we can shed light on the constant disparity that exists for working class black folks that have toted water, did the hard labor to get the city of Tampa to the point that it's at now, and to constantly be disrespected and going to a meeting and being told that the desires and the wishes of that community cannot be fulfilled. So that's where I'm be moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Goode.
Since my name was called, I can see some of Ms. Burton's frustration. When I sat on that board, I would be frustrated at times. So I understand her frustration that we couldn't get a quorum multitude of times because of the lack of volunteerism. It was disheartening at times when I did sit on that board. So I understand when I could not even get a quorum to move things for the East Tampa partnership. I do know that the new chair, I want to make it public, she's working diligently to bring some new ideas and programs. I know she's been out there trying to get people who have expertise to be a part of the board. I know the board's getting ready to submit names, so hopefully we're going to be moving in a different light. That is my prayer, that is my hope. I know she tried hard with that housing RFP because we know there's a situation with funding, how the housing department has a lot of regulations, and that's why she tried to get this RFP done for dollars that we wouldn't have to go through so many stringent protocols in reference to getting people money. Because when you deal with federal government money, a lot of times there are a lot of restraints and conditions. So I'm hoping that this new program will work. And again, I feel you right as it relates to not having quorum. So hopefully the chair is working on that, and hopefully we'll have some members that can then be filled some of those positions. But thank you for the concern.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Dingfelder.
Ms. Burton, and I too appreciate you coming down and taking your time and your family here to enlighten us on certain things and to raise certain important issues. I think you heard earlier an explanation about the SPP money. It was enlightening to me in part because otherwise I just know what I read in the paper, which is not always fully complete. So I think what we learned was a couple of things. Number one is, potentially up to $50 million. It sounds like it's going to be less, maybe 30, 35 million of this downtown CRA money going to improve the city streets, stormwater, wastewater in that specific area. Now, I know you've been around as long or longer than I have in these meetings. You know that the downtown CRA money can only be spent within the 1 or 2 mile confines of the downtown district. That's state law. So even if we wanted to take that money and spend it in East Tampa, state law doesn't allow us to do that. East Tampa money has to be spent in East Tampa CRA, downtown CRA is spent here. Whether or not that was a wise decision 2 years ago or whatever, we could argue, but it's already a commitment that a prior board had made. But anyway, so I just wanted to clarify those 2 points. Hopefully that SPP development, redevelopment will raise all ships and people will have employment in those hotels, businesses that are going to go down there with the SPP development. I'm sure that's Mr. Bennick's hope because he seems like a decent man and investing a lot of his own capital as well. So we'll just cross our fingers and hope that's a great thing for the city. But I wanted to bring up that point earlier just to clarify for you and anybody else who's watching what that $50 million commitment was about.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Councilman Carlson.
Ms. Burton, sorry to hold you up there again. Thank you for mentioning Martin Chambers. I also posted the Times story about him the other day, and with the heading that we need to work on equity, continue to work on equity throughout the city. And I think you know that you have a lot of friendly ears up here, and we're legitimately trying to move things in a different direction. And I know I'm having lots of conversations with staff and the mayor, and I think my colleagues are too. I think all of us would like things to move faster, but it's taking more time than we expected. But we appreciate your guidance and input, and suggestions you have on how to create a new plan and new ideas for the future would be welcome. And I'm happy to meet with you again to talk about that too.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
And Tesnot, want to say one thing that people have to know, Tampa, Florida, about coming down here and putting life in an overall perspective of how it works for the African, from chattel slavery to sharecropping to civil rights to gentrification. It's all about trickery. When you hear about CRA and CDC and all these other, looks like Grant's soup kitchen. A lot of greed, mismanagement going on. That's what it looks like. And it's a way white people can take money away from the African community, federal money, state money, county money, city money, private money, away from the African communities and away from the African, and keep us, we're 26% of this population in the city of Tampa, and they reducing it every single day because they kicking us out of Riverview, Safety Harbor, Palm Harbor, different places that's not indigenous to even the 100-year-old population here in the city of Tampa. And it's all about trickery. Nothing more, nothing less. It's about trickery. And there's nothing wrong in development. It's nothing wrong in progress. Everybody loved that. It's nothing wrong in gentrification. It's nothing wrong in redevelopment. And it's nothing wrong in revitalization. But it's something wrong in genocide. And it's something wrong with the purposeful and intentional extension of the African man, woman, and child. There's something definitely wrong with that. And there's something definitely wrong with being insensitive to African people's feelings, our needs, our desires, our ambitions. It's something very, very, very wrong and insensitive about that. Insensitivity
You know how some gay people are insensitive when you say certain things to them. When you make a gay joke, this 2019 or 2020, you have to be more sensitive. You have to be more sensitive that when the black man started talking, the white man walked away from the podium. When the black city council representative started talking, the white man walked away from the podium. You have to be, black people are sensitive to these things, very sensitive. And it's time you get some advancement. We have a different board here. It's time you get some advancement and some respect in this city, not from the previous garbage mayor or the current one that the biggest program going on is Boom by the Bay. And there's so many homeless people walking out right down here, but all on TV, Boom by the Bay, and haven't been up here one single time to show her face, her or his face, to represent the constituents in any way whatsoever. There's something wrong about that.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Any other public comments? Seeing none, let's move to item number 4.
Council, we're asking to transfer funds from the Drew Park CRA Neighborhood Infrastructure Project to the Tampa Bay Boulevard Linear Park Project. That's the building of a park on Tampa Bay Boulevard in the Drew Park CRA.
Councilman Dinkfelder.
So I can picture Tampa Bay Boulevard comes past the police station there.
Correct.
Between the police station and HCC as it makes its way into Drew Park. I think it goes down and has a little circle down toward the end. So tell this new CRA member what
if you continue going west.
Yeah, what the linear park is.
Malcolm Conner, West Tampa, Drew Park CRA manager. So you're correct. The park is actually in the public right-of-way between Lois and Air Cargo Road.
Okay, so Lois, I think, is the circle.
Is the roundabout, correct.
Okay, and then, so what is the park? What sort of park are we doing at the linear?
So,
is this a bike trail? What is it?
It has walking paths in it, and these aren't the best images, but I brought these just in case you asked this question. So this is the concept plan for the actual linear park. So what we're doing, and this comes from the community, from the CAC. They did a master plan several years ago, and in that plan I identified about 11 projects within the Drew Park area. One of the first really large-scale projects was the improvements made on Lois and Grady. So those improvements included stormwater treatment, beautification, sidewalks, furnishing, street trees. And a big part of that was making a connection from from Tampa Bay Boulevard, down Lois, to Hillsborough, and then around to Air Cargo Road, which is the airport's road, a nice new road, back down to Tampa Bay Boulevard. In this area of Tampa Bay Boulevard, to the north of the linear park, we have incomplete sidewalk connections. So this project works to improve those. Within the actual park itself, if you take a look at the image, we've included obviously trees, we've added parking, as well as a walking trail, and some seating areas that are not shown here.
And so, I guess how big is the residential population in Drew Park? I think it kind of leans this way, the residences, and so you think this will actually be used by folks?
That is yes.
And finally, is there a maintenance obligation that's going to be annual to the CRA for this, or is Parks and Rec going to pick it up as part of their regular stuff?
So, the answer to your two questions, the intention is yes, that the residences, this is also just in front of the TCC-owned apartments, Hawks Landing, and behind that is the residential area of Drew Park. So our hope is that folks in the area will utilize the park, as well as it supplement the activities that go on in and around Drew Park, like Bucks games, as well as Yankees games, and the other events that occur in the area. In terms of the maintenance, yes, there will be a maintenance component that will be covered by the Drew Park CRA for some term. Our hope is that we'll maintain it to make sure that everything remains established, get an understanding of those costs, and then at some point transfer those costs over to the city.
Okay, yeah, again, if you assure us that this was a strong feeling from that board and from the residents in that area, that this is what they want, I guess I can be supportive of it. It seems a little bit out of the way and not very central to the district. And also, it does concern me, how big is the maintenance responsibility, and it concerns me that it could just sort of last forever and be a drain on the CRA. And that's not a very big CRA,
No.
dollar-wise. So how big is the maintenance obligation?
We have not identified that number as of yet, but we can come back with an estimate of that at our next meeting. And at your next meeting, you will be hearing from a representative from Drew Park.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you. In fact, leave it there, please. That area there is where, I believe in the corner on the northwest corner, is where Elsie the cow used to be, Borden's Dairy. Am I correct?
You are the historian, I am not.
Well, you're the first one that tells me that I've been correct on anything without telling me. And then, when you look at Drew Park, right behind that, just to the north of that, maybe 40 feet, 50 feet, isn't that now apartment buildings where most of the students are there from?
Yes, Hawks
Hillsborough
Landing.
Community College?
Yes, sir, Hawks
Hillsborough
Landing.
Community College has made an enormous investment in the Del Mabry, HCC, and in others, but in the Del Mabry one, they just completed a mass investment project to help the young, and mainly a lot of us who couldn't afford to go to college for 2 years, go to HCC for 2 years, and then go to a regular 4-year college. It's a transfer, it's a feeding area to University of South Florida. And it's been needed for a while. That area there has been terribly ugly, I hate to say it that way. But with this enhancement there, I think it would be a great enhancement for Drew Park. When you look, the city put, this here is just west, I would say about 4 blocks away from on the south side of that same location, but further east, 3 or 4 blocks of the police station that's there. And there wasn't even a traffic light there once, now there is, just to the east. And the runabout works. Maybe some semis have trouble, but Drew Park is primarily not a residential area. It's right to say that, but it has a component residents that need the same amenities that they need anywhere else. So I understand why they need it. In fact, Drew Park on the facade program has done a lot of facades, and it looks rather nice. Drew Park has made some giant steps in the last 15, 20 years, and I hope it continues that way.
I agree with you, Councilman Miranda. Any other comments, questions? Councilman Carlson.
I know that the airport had been assembling property there years ago. Is this park tied to residents' interests, or is there some big development that you think this might spur?
Well, it's twofold. You are correct. The airport has acquired the majority of the property, well, all of the property west of Air Cargo Road, and they have some rather large developments that they are planning and are underway. And I think there was an announcement made not too long ago regarding a very large firm, and Bob can be able to share the details of that. But it is also in part, largely in part, for those folks that live in that area, so that they have the connectivity throughout Drew Park to ride their bikes, connect to Traverse, Lois, to Hillsborough, back down to Tampa Bay Boulevard.
Any other comments or questions? I will entertain a motion if Mr.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Very good. The motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 5.
Item number 5, we're asking for the reappointment of a West Tampa CRA Advisory Committee, a Benjamin Buckley.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Mr. Buckley.
We're asking for, on item number 6, for the appointment for Central Park for a Ms. Gwendolyn Myers.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Congratulations, Ms. Myers.
The appointment of Michael Cass to the Drew Park CAC.
Second.
Motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, second by Councilman Miranda. All in favor, say aye.
The appointment of Michael Jarmer to the downtown CAC.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made to approve, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
A facade grant in West Tampa on Cypress Street. This is the conversion of this building to a dentist's office, and the dentist is here if you would like to speak with him, the applicant.
Hello, my name's David Goldshine. Hi. First off, being a resident of downtown Tampa for over a decade now, it's amazing to see all that's been going on. Proud to be part of it. Coming here, I'm grateful and appreciative of everyone to consider helping my small business. Generations Dentistry is the path I've chosen to give me purpose in life. Personally, I'm a third-generation dentist, following in the footsteps of my father and grandfather. I've seen what an impact on people's lives dentistry can truly have. The ability to eat without pain and smile with confidence means so much to me. My staff and I plan to establish this corner to be a landmark that this neighborhood can come for quality dentistry, as my father and grandfather did for their communities. Thank you for helping me make this location on the outside symbolic of the high level of care every patient will receive when they walk through my doors. This is my heart and soul. Thank you.
Councilman Miranda.
If I may, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That whole area that you're talking about on your general office there is certainly traveled very heavily all the time. In fact, on the east side of you, there's a fence company. All that property's for sale. Then down the street, used to be a garage there, and now I think it's a pickup or call the Hawk, and he'll come in and move you, whatever it is.
College hunks.
And across from you is family, the Caters, all the family, and across from you directly is that gas station now has some food, and the house just on the west side of you has been, someone spent a little money on it, and next to that one was a little house that was in code enforcement for I don't know how long, and it looks rather nice. I just saw it yesterday. It looks very nice. So I commend you for that location. It's a location that certainly thousands of cars pass through it heading south on Armenia or heading east or west on Cypress, and I commend you for that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councilman Goose.
This is East MLK?
We're actually, this item is actually item 10.
Okay, I must have missed it. Okay.
Armenia and
We
Cyprus.
jumped item 9, but that's all right.
I'm sorry, I had it in apparently it was in my book backwards.
I was finna say, where's that from?
This is the corner.
I apologize.
This is the corner of Armenia.
They jumped, rapidly moved into
Armenia,
10.
Yes,
Armenia and
a
Cyprus.
thousand lashes, excuse me. This is item 10, and I'll come back to item 9. Excuse
Thank
me.
you, Mr. McDonough.
My mistake.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman Dickfelder.
Yeah, on a personal note, and I don't think I need to recuse myself, but Dr. Goldschein has been my dentist for a couple of years. He's a good man, and this looks like a great little project, and it's a 50. I think just wanted to clarify for anybody who's watching, it's a 50-50 program. So whatever money the CRA puts into it, he matches, or vice versa, and that corner definitely could use a little sprucing up. So
Need some love.
Congratulations.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Then Councilman Dinkfelder, would you like to read the resolution? No, you want?
Not necessary.
We're good, we're good. We're good. My apologies. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It passes. Congratulations. Now let's go back to item 9.
Again, my apologies. And
Thank you.
Move the resolution unless there's discussion. Oh, sorry.
Shall we hear about it?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
again, East Tampa, Martin Luther King, so again, a very visible site. And they're replacing storefront windows, doors, awnings, landscaping, hardscape. So basically the idea is to change the entire appearance. Probably one of the best examples that I can think of is Carsmetics on Dale Mabry, who had a similar scope of work. And if anybody's driven by there, you can see what an amazing change. And that's the plan that these folks are doing as well.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Councilman Maniscalco. Mr. McDonough, does that complete your work today?
That concludes with the exception of Councilman Goods, if I owe you an apology, I certainly, I mean no disrespect. When I stepped away, it was, get out of the way of the lawyers.
I'm a big enough mouthpiece on loan, but I thought you disrespect me. Me and you have a conversation.
I'd be hearing it. That's right. All right, thank you.
Mr. Dingfelder and Councilman Dingfelder and Councilman Goods, the rewriting of the motion that was presented earlier, are both of you comfortable with that motion? Is there any friendly amendments you would like to add, or any other council members as we're reading it now?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just for the record, we've been past the typed-up revision of Mr. Chairman's motion. I did have one slight tweak in the second line. So right now, the motion says each committee will elect a chairperson and a vice chairperson to act in the chair's absence for a respective one 2-year term period. So just to tweak that up a little bit, and also to be a little more consistent with what was there before, what I would suggest is the last part of that sentence, chairperson and vice chairperson to act in the chair's absence for a 1 or 2-year term, comma, at the discretion of the committee. It appeared to me that we wanted to give each of the areas, the committees, the discretion to do a 1-year term or a 2-year term for their chair. That's what my friendly suggestion is to stay consistent with that, because I don't know what's going on out there in terms of maybe they want just a 1-year term in Drew Park, but they want a 2-year term in West Tampa, so let's give them the discretion to do that.
I have no problem with that, I mean, the board.
So that's my friendly suggestion. After you make the revised motion, I can tag that on, or you can tag it on right now. It's up to you.
Any other comments?
Back to what Mr. Torito said earlier, I think it's confusing. It says 1 consecutive term. Should we just say 1 2-year term?
1 or 1 2-year term then.
What I'm saying at the end of the first sentence, Bill, is to act in the chair's absence for a 1 or 2-year term, comma, at the discretion of the committee.
Yeah, and then the second, was it fourth line there, says vice chair for more than 1 consecutive term. So you're going to take that out?
Just say 1 term? Or you want to strike the whole
one
sentence?
consecutive term, when you first said it, sounded to me like 2 terms also, but you just mean 1 term. We don't need the word consecutive.
For one term. Or
If I may, use of consecutive means that after you're out for a long period.
you could come back.
Oh, okay. So you're okay with that?
Right. That's a good word.
Okay, all right. I withdraw.
Any other comments or questions?
So you want to read the revised motion, Mr. Chair? Or?
No, actually, Mr. Dingfelder, excuse me 1 second.
Sidebar.
Excuse me, sidebar with my wonderful aide. Okay. Mr. Dingfelder, would you like to read out the motion then, please?
Sure.
Yeah, hang on 1 second. My aide has the revised to what you were.
That was
Can
quick.
we all have a copy of that just so we can glance at it real quick? Thank you.
I have one more quick idea. Should I give it to now or after we make the motion?
Please, by all means.
Just
maybe my aide can run back and print up some more.
It says a term limitation may be waived by the CRA board. Should we say for 1 additional consecutive term?
It may not be for 1. It may be for 4, 5, 6 years if somebody doesn't come in and fill the position.
But wouldn't we be doing it 1 at a time?
I have to understand.
Yes,
If you really want to tighten it up, I believe
there are no
a council member calls for a 1 or 2-year term, and then it's going to have to be somebody, whoever's here, to make that other decision.
I think that was your intent anyway, right? So that's just trying
Yes,
to
sir.
clarify.
If you would like to add that.
And what specific word are you adding, Bill?
The term limitation may be
for one additional term. Okay.
For one additional term?
Yeah.
I don't know why we're putting it, we're already saying that this board has the right to waive, correct,
Yeah.
Chair? So I don't think that's needed, I don't think that's needed, because we're already saying that this board will be the person to enact a change. If a waiver is needed, we're gonna grant that, so I don't think they keep doing the additional on it, it's gonna do any good. Your opinion, sir, I think it's gonna add more to it.
The way it's currently drafted, if they serve an additional term, and then the circumstance arises. Sorry, in the event that the one additional term that is waived is followed by the same circumstance, then that elected officer needs to come back for a waiver, as it's currently written, and I think that addresses the board member's concern.
Well, so we don't know what the circumstances really are with any one of them, anything can happen. So if we do that, then that's opening the door, you can have consecutive terms forever.
In the event that if you have no other candidates, and what we're trying to address is the situation where, as volunteers, you may have somebody who is the sole candidate for any number of terms. That's the only circumstance where the waiver is, envisioned, but it always comes back to the CRA board. You are the final decision maker. If you choose that you don't want to happen, and there's always the option of let's annul the board, appoint a new board, and find out somebody else who wants to be a chair. But right now, as it's currently drafted, each time that the circumstances occur, it gives the CRA board an opportunity to make that waiver.
Bill, the only concern, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Bill, the only concern I have on your suggestion, although I hear what you're saying, is that if we say for one additional term, it almost is implied that at the end of that 2 years, and if they're messed up and there's nobody there to fill it, that we couldn't waive it again. That's how I would read it too, which is a handcuffs that I don't know if we want to impose on any future body like this. So it might be better just to leave it the way it is right now. The term limitation may be waived by the CRA board, period. That's just, Mr. Chair. I'll read the motion if you wish.
Are you comfortable with pulling your friendly amendment? Yes. Okay, please, continue.
Okay, so this would be a revised policy item, policy 7, term of office for committees elected officers. Each committee will elect a chairperson and a vice chairperson to act in the chair's absence for a 1 or 2 year term, comma, at the discretion of the committee, period. No person shall be elected to the office of chairperson or vice chairperson for more than one consecutive term. This policy shall exclude the term of elected officers of the YCDC and East Tampa CRA, comma, which are governed by their bylaws that preceded this policy, period. In the event that there are no candidates to the chair or vice chair positions, comma, the term limitation may be waived by the CRA board, period.
You have a motion made by Councilman Dingfelder, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Excuse me. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
And so an afterthought, and I chose to do it as an afterthought so I wouldn't complicate what has now been made as a completed motion. I would also add, given the initial statements by the chair, that a motion be included that makes the effective date or the enforcement of this policy prospective, and that any current officer holding a position will be allowed to terminate or to finish out their elected term.
that was my intent of making the original motion. However, if it's needed to be said on the record that all present.
I think it would be a good motion to make, and that could be written as the part of 7, as an asterisk for effective date and enforcement.
Okay, Councilman Dingfelder, would you like to add to that motion you just made?
Sure. Make that motion as stated by legal counsel.
I have a motion duly made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
And I will be drafting and printing again, and we'll have this to you as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. See what we can all do together when we have great dialogue. I have a motion, excuse me, I have a comment that I want to make at the end of the meeting. However,
for additional business?
Yes, and that's what I'm going to ask for now. Any additional business or information reports? Councilman Carlson. Concerning CRAs.
Yeah, so the last meeting, the meeting before, Councilmember Dingfelder, God, now you made me say it, Dingfelder.
It's happening to everybody.
Yeah, he made a motion, and the board approved to have, I think, a workshop on the discussion of the management of the CRAs, but we never set a date for it. So could we? You have a motion to do that?
Yeah, and I have clarification on that. We looked at the record. The transcript indicates 60 days out, so my motion to clarify would be July 9th, our July 9th CRA meeting, if that works for everybody, and if you want to put it out to...
After July 9th, because I'm not here.
Yeah, if you want to put it out to August, that's fine with me too.
Give us the date.
Our August date is what, Mr. McDonough, do you know?
August 8th.
Does that work for everybody?
2019.
Okay, so August the 8th, under staff presentation.
Second? Second. Okay, motion made by Councilman Dingfelder, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Also, Mr. Chair, I want to introduce a legal intern in my office, Elizabeth Doney, D-O-N-E-Y, who is a Fordham who's a Fordham student in New York. She grew up here, wonderful family, wonderful parents, graduate of Plant High School, and is going into her junior year at Fordham in New York. But she's here to help us this summer. So welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Councilman Miranda.
I don't have any, sir.
Thank you. Councilman Vieira.
Nothing, sir.
Councilman Maniscalco.
Nothing, sir.
Councilman Goose.
Yes, sir. I just received a memorandum from my aide that State Rep Diane Hart has been rushed to the hospital. Don't know the circumstance this time, but I'll be heading there shortly.
Thank you. Please keep us informed. Anything further, Councilman Dingfelder?
No, our best to Representative Hart.
Please and thank you.
Before adjournment, I'd like to introduce an extern that has been working diligently on the questions that you raised. I had asked him to do a presentation to you in July, but now that presentation has moved to August, he will no longer be with us. I'd like to introduce him. Taylor Schock, please stand up.
Taylor, please come up to the podium.
And with the approval and consent of the board, I'd like to submit his memorandum through me to the board for your consumption. He has done an excellent job of addressing the questions that were raised by the CRA board.
And what was this about?
The capacity of the CRA board to appoint outside staff, whether they are required to do so by bid, and whether they have discretion in termination.
Okay.
Thank you, Gaston.
Taylor, take it away.
So Taylor Schock, legal intern with the legal department. So
The background where you go to school, where you're at.
I'm legal. I go to law school at Florida State University, and I'm spending the summer here with the legal department, and I'm having a great time so far.
Sure, go ahead, Councilman Vieira.
Question, do you know a young man named Chris Berg at FSU Law? B-E-R-G?
What year?
I think his first year.
Oh, I'm sorry, not yet.
Oh, second. He'll be going. Okay, well, if you ever run around a nice guy named Chris Berg, he used to be my aide here, and he's one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and a future great attorney. So I'm an attorney myself, and so is Councilman Dingfelder. So.
Thank you, Councilman. I'll look out for him.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Move to receive and file.
Hang on 1 second. I wanted to make a statement if I could. I always encourage every council person to attend CRA, CDC meetings, CIC meetings, so that we can hear the public's voices. I have been going to some. I know that Councilman Maniscalco, and I know that Councilman Goods goes to these meetings. However, there are some legalities that I would like council to state today if he could and if he would.
If you don't mind, I actually brought the existing policy, but what I would like to do is to write out a detailed outline and possibly present it to the board what the concerns and parameters are during your next meeting, maybe in August, so that I have everyone here and we don't have this is in the nature of a guidance session, and perhaps, at the discretion or at the wish of the CRA board, we could have a workshop on policies and procedures. I think that would be helpful because we have some new members that have not served before the CRA before, some that have come back may not remember some of these issues, and some may have changed. So it'd be a good idea to brush up on all of those issues.
Do you have a date so that we may allot the time?
You said August?
August would be fine.
How long is this meeting going to take place? Or how long is the information going to be that you want to present?
It would probably be good to block out an hour. I'd like to cover the overall policies of CACs, policies of CRA in attending and participating with CAC, what parameters there are, and then I could also address issues concerning CAC and sunshine law and public records. I know that you get all that as members of city council, but it might be enlightening to know that some of those issues, if not all, also affect the CAC, so that you have a better knowledge of the parameters of your participation with the CAC.
Do we have time? Councilman Dingfelder, please.
I could make it
I'll
shorter,
come back to you in 2
but
seconds.
I'd like to be conservative and allot an hour so that if we need to cover.
Can we make it in July? I know we have limited time.
July,
Yes.
we're not here
Just,
as council, we're not gonna be here until the end of July.
Do we have a CRA meeting in July? All right, then we, August 8th?
Yeah.
So everybody, is that, sorry?
Let me ask you, I'm a little confused on this July meeting, because I didn't think we had, I thought we were off the first 2 weeks of July.
That's what I think.
CRA meeting is on the 25th.
Does any council member have any type of situations or anything on that date?
July 25th.
Do we feel comfortable with July 25th?
It's a great day. But I did have a comment.
Yes, sir. Councilman Dingfelder.
Just a subset comment. I've been hesitant to attend the CAC meetings just for that reason, because I know if two of us end up at one of those meetings, that it could potentially create a sunshine issue. However, I would like to attend those. I'd like more than one of us to be able to attend those. So I would ask legal counsel, in addition to advising us of your concerns, to perhaps give us any suggestions that you might have, because now those are sunshine meetings anyway, because those boards have to operate in the sunshine themselves. So, so if we attend, but just as a suggestion, Sal, perhaps don't participate. We just attend as observers and listen. Maybe that could help alleviate some of those sunshine concerns, et cetera. I'm not trying to solve that today, but I'm just throwing it out.
Just as a caveat.
That's exactly what we'd want to do.
Okay.
There is an existing policy that addresses some of those concerns, and if there are any others and we need to go back again, I have a pen. So
Okay.
we shall do what the CRA decides and move forward.
So I'll move that legal comes back to us with
July
this
25th?
on July 25th with this information as well as any discussion. You can put it anywhere you wish on the agenda, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion by.
Yeah, just one, Sal Torito. The one issue that keeps coming up, and now since you may be going to them before you have this meeting, is that sometimes by having a council member there, they don't feel as free as they'd like to be in having these discussions. And we've had it in the past where some of the council members, and I'm not saying this group, have taken over the meeting as the chair. And that's a problem because they're here to advise you and not to hear what you think should be going on. So it's if you're sitting there and not saying anything, that's perfectly fine. But I know all of our feelings are you have something you want to say, and that has caused an issue in the past with some of the groups. They feel somewhat intimidated by having you there. And that's all I have to say about that.
Sir, we had a process once upon a time that we would have actually a called meeting at each of the different districts. And the board would attend. It could be done in the evening. And it was an opportunity for the CRA board then to hear the concerns of the community. We did that about every 4 or 6 months and rotated throughout the city. If that's the board's pleasure, we can talk about that again in June if that's another thing you might like to consider. Where then you don't have the potential issue of one or more board members or sunshine, that type of thing. It's a called meeting and it's in the public venue, and it's an opportunity for you to get to hear what the community says.
If you'd like to prepare that for that meeting and state that, please, by all means.
I shall. Thank you.
Councilman Moran.
I've had my own policy. I don't attend any of them, not because of me, but the position that I hold. And I just don't, the furthest I stay away, the better it is. When I see them here, I get the same information I was going to get there, but the presence of an elected official being there, whoever, this is just mine, to me, not to anybody else. I just don't attend. That way I can't sway anybody's opinion or swallow somebody's comment or anything like that.
And for my own sidebar, I attend, I listen to public comments, but then when it comes time for business, I leave. That way I have no ex parte communications as far as budgets and other things like that. We have a motion still on the floor made by Councilman Dingfelder, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Move to receive and file.
Second. We are adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get out of here. I'm trying to get you guys out of here. Motion's been made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.